Insulin and inflammation are the two killers. And yet, in most primary care settings, insulin's never checked, inflammatory markers are never checked.
That's scary. If you were to define cancer, how would you define cancer?
As a metabolic disease.
As a metabolic disease.
Yeah.
Joining us today is Dr. Steve Rallis, Chief Medical Officer of DripBar, founding member of the American IV Association, author, and widely known as the wellness doctor.
Specializing in high-dose vitamin C IV therapy for cancer treatment. Stay tuned for his insights on proactive wellness.
Vitamin IV therapy is so poorly understood. And hopefully part of what we're doing today is going to shed light on the misunderstanding and why it's misunderstood. What most people don't know is the mitochondria is also responsible for cell differentiation.
What does that mean?
That means the more nutrition you get, the more nutrition you use. The more drug therapy training you get, the more drug therapy you use. If 6 of your courses in medical school are on spinal manipulation, guess what? You're going to do more spinal manipulation.
Yeah.
Functional medicine is the only model that allows us to see the patient properly.
Taking that deep dive, you utilize high-dose vitamin C for cancer patients. Have you had any patients that come to you and says, I just want to do natural treatments, I want to do vitamin C?
I have.
Have you actually seen the cancer ever reverse itself just going that route?
What you see is that
Welcome to another episode of A Healthy Point of View podcast. I'm your host, Sam Tejada. And as usual, we're bringing experts from all over the world to talk about health, wellness, beauty, and mindset. Today, this is a special guest. He's on the Scientific Advisory Board with the American IV Association, which you guys know, I'm the chairman of the Leadership Advisory Board with American IV Association. He's putting a lot of great science behind what we're doing in the IV therapy space. He's coming all the way down from Canada, the Chief Medical Officer of DripBar, one of the largest IV therapy companies in the world. Today we have Dr. Steven Rallis. How are you, brother? Hey, there we go. Woo! Pleasure, man. Hey,
that is an intro. Thanks, guys.
I've been waiting to have you on the podcast.
Oh, you know what? I've been waiting to do this because we get to work together through in the American IV Association, and not exactly in. We have our department, you have your department, but the beauty about you is, and my kids were actually saying this. They're saying, "How the hell does Sam know all this have all of this medical knowledge?" I'm like, because he's informed, he's educated, and no, I really appreciate what you're doing too.
Thank you
for the industry, and for giving us a platform so that we can do really great work, in the American IV Association. And we've launched that journal.
Right.
Not officially launched yet, but this is for the podcast listeners at least. This is kind of like an early bird sort of notification that we will have the Journal of the American IV Association. We are working on studies. We are creating position papers. We are informing the industry. Yeah, we're just doing cool shit, man. And it's a lot of it is because of you. And I know that we're doing a lot of the work as well, but we can't. Yeah, we're really changing the industry. It's amazing.
Yeah, and we're doing it because, a lot of people look at it as like, oh, these guys must be doing it for the money. And I'll be the first one to say, it's like, number one, a lot of the stuff we do, like even with the American IV Association, we're volunteering our time, not only volunteering our time, but we're contributing financially every single month to the association. And that's because we're really passionate about this. Like, we really want to change the course of medicine.
Yeah, we're volunteering so much of our time and so much even of, IV medicine, especially vitamin IV therapy, is so poorly understood.
Right.
And hopefully part of what we're doing today and chatting about high-dose vitamin C is going to shed light on the misunderstanding and why it's misunderstood.
Right.
And it will, because really a lot of the research in high-dose vitamin C, and especially when we talk about pharmacokinetics, it translates to all nutrients or most nutrients. So yeah, I think it's really going to be informative for the listeners, for sure for today. I think that what we're doing, again, in terms of the research, and to your point, it's volunteer work. We're not getting paid to do this. Yeah. And the doctors on these boards are, to their credit, are volunteering a lot of their time.
A lot, yeah. And I always tell people the way I get paid is by having this opportunity of having the most rewarding job possible, which I thought the fire department was that, which it really wasn't. But when you could actually help so many people, right? change the course of their health. To me, that's rewarding. When you get those testimonials, the patients, and you really see them change that trajectory of their health, that's where it's at for me. So, Dr. Rallis, man, you are the expert in high dose vitamin C. Vitamin C, man, it is such a powerful thing. I know that. But a lot of the listeners and viewers of the podcast are probably wondering, why are these guys going to do a podcast on high dose vitamin C? So today, I want to start off with like, how did you even get into the functional medicine space?
Ooh, my undergrad was in biology and biochemistry at Western University, and from there, I was actually when I graduated, I was teaching the MCAT program at Kaplan,
Okay.
believe it or not, and I had a chiropractor that my dad used to hunt with, and we went hunting with him, and he gave me a copy of the Deepak Chopra's book Quantum Healing,
Mm,
and I read it, and I'm not sure what happened, but it transformed my perspective. And I thought at that time functional medicine was just chiropractic in terms of, complementary alternative medical fields. So did my 4-year chiropractic degree. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship. My research in chiropractic was actually on looking at vasomotor changes with spinal manipulation. So I was already ingrained in terms of looking at the autonomic nervous system, looking at nutrition, looking at, again, cardiovascular system changes. And then as my practice evolved and the primary care need of my patients changed over the years, I knew that I needed a second medical degree.
right.
And that's when I did naturopathic medicine. And once I finished my 4-year degree, I did, again, my prescriptive authority and my IV license. And I knew that I wanted to use nutrients in as many ways possible as I could. Because we were using, diet and lifestyle and nutrition, not just drug therapy, because we are trained to do, like I said, we have our prescriptive authority. But I knew that there was more beyond medicine.
Right.
And we're seeing this in our industry. Most of the physicians in our field are conventionally trained, but they all see it too. So this movement towards functional medicine is just the way medicine is moving.
I agree.
It's no different if
Yeah.
someone has, lower back pain. The analogy that I always use is that, in conventional medicine, we're trained just take an X-ray, see if there's pathology on that X-ray. But if you talk to a good personal trainer or a physio, they'll say, well, no, it's because there's weakness in the glute medius, or they have valgus strain on or the kinematic chain of the foot is off, and that's causing the sacroiliac joint to be dysfunctional, and that's where the pain's coming from. So that's a functional medicine model, But conventional is just like looking at it myopically and owning in on it's just pathology, SI joint. Take a muscle, painkiller and a muscle relaxant.
Why is there such a big difference between both? But because like even with like when you look at like medical doctors and you start talking about nutrition, they weren't formally educated in nutrition.
Zero.
You go to a chiropractor, completely different. Like they understand vitamins, minerals, amino acids.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough too because we train. We're one of the only, if not the only, clinic that does rotations for medical students.
Mm,
So I'm very familiar with the curriculum, for medical students, so that they can pass their respective boards. We do integrative medical rotations,
okay.
But from medical training, and obviously I know the naturopathic medical school training because I've done that, and I know the chiropractic medical school training because I've done that also.
Right.
And I know that the difference between the nutrition component in conventional medicine, which is zero, it's only an elective,
Right.
to chiropractic, which is pretty good, to naturopathic medicine, which is frankly phenomenal. And you can see sort of the difference because then those providers use nutrition depending on how they were trained.
Right.
And the more nutrition you get, the more nutrition you use. The more drug therapy training you get, the more drug therapy you use. The more, if 6 of your courses in medical school are on spinal manipulation, guess what? You're going to do more spinal manipulation.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's really what you're trained. And there's such a demand to kind of compress medical education and then get them just to pass the boards that they begin to lose sight of what the big picture of how do you actually treat a patient.
Right.
And functional medicine is the only model that allows us to see the patient properly.
Right. Taking that deep dive, right?
Taking the deep dive, because it could be, if it's IBS, is it foods and it's IgG related? Is it their stress, which is affecting? Is it a methylation pattern that's affecting their neurotransmitters in their gut? What exactly is causing that irritable bowel?
Right.
And when you talk about chronic complex diseases, the magnitude of effect is just magnified, that you can simply not look at or apply a conventional medicine template onto chronic complex diseases like cancer.
Right. Right.
You know, and part of that is this, our medical model is basically based on an infectious disease model. Effectively, we're looking at one cause, one cure. So it worked if it was a bug causing a disease, and you could apply a very simple treatment. Chronic complex disease doesn't look like that.
Right.
But when you try to apply that to cancer, which we're going to talk about, it breaks down. Because in that model, the tumor cell is the bug. So at all costs, you have to kill the tumor. So chemotherapy is the most effective. Issue is that it wipes out the patient's immune system, wipes out their healthy cells, and they're no longer, and moreover, it doesn't actually affect the stem cells. And it doesn't mean that chemotherapy is bad. It's just that you can't apply a infectious disease model to chronic complex disease. And that's true whether it's heart disease, cancer, autoimmune conditions, metabolic diseases, like you name it, you cannot simply apply that model. So it's broken.
Yeah. That's very true. Doc, you know, obviously you've taken a direction when it comes to clinical treatment, where you're utilizing this functional medicine approach primarily, not just cancer patients, but you have a hyper focus on cancer patients, and then other patients that have like autoimmune diseases and whatnot. You know, with the cancer, if you were to define cancer, how would you define cancer?
As a metabolic disease.
As a metabolic disease.
Yeah. And again, back to our medical school training, our medical students are taught that it's a somatic mutation theory. So are the chiropractic students, so are the naturopathic medical students, so are our undergrad students. And this somatic mutations, cancer has a tremendous amount of what's called heterogeneity, which means that if you took two cases of identical, let's say estrogen positive breast cancer, and then mapped the genome, they would have all sorts of different genetic variations in one patient versus the other patient.
Right.
So the mutations are actually occurring downstream, but yet we're still teaching our patients or our students somatic mutation theory. This is interesting. Your listeners are going to love this. The person that is most tightly connected to that theory never treated cancer. So the fact that we're using this SMT, somatic mutation theory, as the dominant concept in cancer treatment, it begins to make sense when you peel back the curtains. Why 50 years later, from Nixon declaring a war on cancer, that cancer rates continue to escalate. Because we're not actually looking at it properly.
Right.
Can you imagine in your business, you're able to solve the problem only when you have the correct lens? Right now, they're filming you on a podcast. If Loso Ricardo puts the wrong lens on, you're out of focus.
Right.
It doesn't matter how many times we try to continue this podcast, it's never going to be in focus until you change the lens.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? So the disease, the condition, the chronic complex conditions need a different lens. That requires actually an entire new way of teaching medicine. Good luck. That's why what you're doing in terms of podcasts like this, the work that you do, actually why it makes so much sense. Because you realize the gaps and you're trying to educate.
Yeah, I mean, we really have a broken medical system. And I saw it, you know, that 12 years doing emergency medicine as a firefighter paramedic, you know, just it was a rotating door of the same people going. And I saw their health just continuously decline. And that's why I told myself, I says, you know what, I can't be part of this broken medical system. Now, with the cancer, you defined it as a metabolic disease. What is metabolic health?
I think the easiest way, sort of the way I kind of describe metabolism, is essentially how your body uses nutrients for fuel.
Okay.
How you basically convert food to fuel. So how that tumor cell uses fuel is much different than our normal cells. So we know that some of the most aggressive and deleterious cancers are, for example, highly glycolytic, meaning that they use sugar in a much different way. So under normal circumstances, you eat food. That food turns into glucose. Glucose is running in our bloodstream. Pancreas releases insulin. The glucose in the bloodstream goes into the cells. So far, so good.
Right.
If we eat a bigger bolus of carbohydrates, there is secondary release of insulin. So insulin gets shunted into the cells. Glucose enters the cell. It's a 6-carbon nutrient, gets broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate. Pyruvate goes into the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the energy producer in the cell. In cancer, the cells stop using the mitochondria.
Okay.
So pyruvate doesn't go to the mitochondria. It goes to lactate. The enzyme that converts that is lactate dehydrogenase. Again, it's one of the reasons why when we're doing blood work, we're looking at LDH levels. So LDH levels above greater than 185, risk for disease-free progression goes down. In other words, risk for death goes up. LDH goes down, patient stabilizes, or it's one of the markers, one of the metabolic markers. So is fasting insulin. So is inflammation, because what ends up happening in that environment, in a metabolic environment, it's very characteristic. It's true for all diseases,
Right.
metabolic diseases. You get increased inflammation. You get changes to insulin. You get changes to how glucose is being used. You get changes then to how the cell is differentiating. You get parts of it turning on, parts of it turning off. And the characteristic of this is cancer, because once you shut off the mitochondria, you're no longer using sugar or glucose the same way. And what most people don't know is the mitochondria is also responsible for cell differentiation.
What does that mean?
That means as a liver cell becomes another liver cell, it uses the mitochondria as part of that cellular differentiation so that the stem cell becomes a liver cell as it's going through its replication, because all our cells are replicating rapidly. But if they're rapid, so liver cell becomes liver cell, becomes liver cell, becomes liver cell, then I shut off the mitochondria, that liver cell doesn't know how to differentiate. Means it becomes an undifferentiated cell. That's what a tumor is. It's an undifferentiated cell.
It sounds like almost like it becomes a domino effect at that point.
That's right.
It just keeps on growing and growing. And that's when the tumor starts to grow.
That's
right?
when the tumor starts to grow. And a lot of these mutations that are being studied, we'll use an example like a KRAS positive mutation in aggressive colorectal cancers. If the KRAS gene gets turned off, so where we say that colorectal cancer, let's say an adenocarcinoma, is aggressive, then that becomes more, undifferentiation just gets ramped up.
Right.
So yeah, so eventually at some point, we're going to figure out how to turn the mitochondria back on.
Yeah, because that's where my head's going right now. It's like, well, how do you stop it from going into the domino effect where it just keeps on growing, growing, growing? What would be the first step?
That's probably a question for a brain way bigger than mine. But here's what we can do, is we can put metabolic pressures at all the different steps. So if we know that KRAS positive adenocarcinoma, the colorectal cancer, is highly glycolytic, we can maybe reduce blood sugar, maybe a ketogenic diet.
Right.
Sorry, because that fuel, that is not very good at using ketones as a fuel source. You could use an off-label medication like metformin, again, which makes it difficult for that to accumulate sugar, puts a metabolic stress on it. You can use a plant medicine like berberine.
Now,
Again,
and those are typically like metformin's utilized for like type 2 diabetes, right?
yeah, that's right.
So what about the GLP-1 drugs? Do those help with that whatsoever at all?
They will help. I don't know exactly how.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that either.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
they will help because you're affecting that metabolic state, and that's why berberine again will work. That's why changing your fuel supply, because again, like you made this great post on glutamine. So that cell is going to preferentially use glucose, then it's going to switch to glutamine.
right?
But if you can potentially switch it completely to ketones, it just isn't going to use those effectively.
Right, right. So now you utilize high dose vitamin C for cancer patients and other
Yeah,
types of
and other-
patients as well. But with the cancer patients, what is the high dose vitamin C doing? Well, before we even go that route, what is high dose vitamin C? Because you got regular vitamin C and then you have high dose vitamin
Yeah,
C.
yeah, no, that's
What's
such a good question.
Let's start off with
start
talking
from-
about vitamin
We'll start
C,
from the beginning,
right?
Yeah, we'll almost start from the beginning. So vitamin C is an antioxidant.
Right.
That's what we're taught, and it's a powerful antioxidant, and that's true. It is. And when vitamin C is administered intravenously at a certain dose, it switches from being an antioxidant to being a pro-oxidant.
So it's like an oxidizer.
It becomes an oxidizer, much like chemotherapy is an oxidative therapy.
I mean, that's the complete opposite of an antioxidant.
That's right.
Right.
And it's at that transition point where vitamin C becomes high dose.
Okay.
So it's not really clearly defined. It could be 10 grams, it could be 15 grams. Like we say loosely, between around 15 grams is going to be considered high dose vitamin C. And we know that because at that oxidative potential, it can damage cells. Vitamin C at high doses normally doesn't damage our healthy cells. That's one of the beauties, is that it's selectively cytotoxic, affects tumor cells at high doses, doesn't affect our normal cells.
Right.
And the reason it doesn't affect our normal cells is our normal cells have this enzyme called glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, or G6PD.
The G6PD test.
G6PD test. So never under any circumstances should vitamin C ever be administered at greater than 15 grams, let's say, without a G6PD test.
Who has who would test, in a negative way with the G6PD test?
Like who wouldn't test?
Yeah. Well, like what happens when you do the G6PD test and someone has that deficiency?
The moment you administer that, the red blood cell bursts. So if your red blood cells do not have adequate G6PD, it causes lysis, which can cause death,
Wow.
like literally death.
Yeah, that's almost like when if someone were to like inject sterile water directly into the vein,
Exactly.
those blood cells will burst, right?
Yeah, and this and I talk about this in the book too, when the story of high dose vitamin C really goes back to the 1970s. And there was a Scottish surgeon named Ewan Cameron who was treating end-stage cancer patients. And at that time, this is early 1970s, they were defining end-stage as less than 2 months to live. They've exhausted all treatments. And he was using IV vitamin C and finding that they seemed to be living longer and they seemed to be having a higher quality of life. Linus Pauling got wind of this, and Linus Pauling was a very strong advocate of vitamin C. And he found Dr. Cameron's work compelling, went to Scotland, and proposed that they do a research study together. He was a scientist, in fact, one of 4 two-time Nobel Prize winners in science.
Nice.
And this is, when you look at that list, it's a short list of legends. This is the pantheon. This is the Mount Rushmore of scientists.
Yeah.
And he said, let's do a study together. And they looked at, they took 1,000 patients from Dr. Cameron's hospital, the Vale 11 Hospital in Scotland, administered 10 grams of vitamin C IV every day for 10 days. And then they took it with a control group. And what they found was that the IV vitamin C patients lived considerably longer. 90% of them were living something like 100 to 200 to 300% longer, significantly longer,
Wow.
doubling their and tripling their life expectancy. 10% were living even longer. So they were all responding statistically.
Interesting.
Published in 1976, the Proceedings, National Academy of Sciences, which at that time was a huge journal. That was a huge journal. And specifically, Pauling, I believe, used that journal because it was the science journal at the time. Tons of positive press, tons of blowback. There was big movements against anything related to natural medicine emerging at that time. Undeterred, Pauling said, let's do the study again. And they did it again. They found even greater results. The patients were living at least 300 plus days longer than the control group.
Wow.
Under much tighter controls. 10 grams IV vitamin C for 10 days. And again, in terms of what we're doing, that's almost nothing. And statistically, again, living way longer. Then the story takes this turn. In the book, I say, enter Charles Myrtle. Charles Myrtle worked for the Mayo Clinic at that time. He was the OG quackbuster of the time.
Quackbuster.
The quackbuster. Like, this was complete bullshit, what Pauling and Cameron are doing. And, it's not medicine. You can't use vitamins to treat cancer. Complete bullshit. And under the aegis of the Mayo Clinic, he said, we will redo Pauling and Cameron's work to the letter. And they did. Sort of.
Why sort of?
They followed it. They didn't administer IV vitamin C. They did 10 grams orally.
So I was going to ask you, because you mentioned high dose vitamin C intravenously. Why can't we do the high dose just oral?
I'll get to it. So they redid the study, which is what a lot of people that are out there think, which is why we do the work we do in the American IV Association, because it's a totally different type of medicine.
Right.
So they followed Pauling and Cameron's, outline, research platform, and they got zero results. Published in the New England Journal, 1980. All these studies are still available in full text, by the way, which basically dropped the nuclear bomb on vitamin therapy for cancer.
Wow.
It was almost end of story.
What was wrong with that study that they repeated?
They didn't use IV vitamin C.
It
wasn't until the early 2000s, when the pharmacokinetics studies actually came out, that they really began to understand why Pauling and Cameron were right.
They were given 10 grams orally?
Orally.
Damn, that sounds like a very bad day for whoever was going through that process.
Can you imagine for a cancer patient who's already losing weight?
Yeah. I mean, you'd lose the rest of your weight from the severe diarrhea you're going to get from it.
Because it's an osmotic laxative.
Right.
And in the early 2000s, when they did the pharmacokinetic studies, and again, for the listeners, pharmacokinetics is just, in very simple terms, how a drug is absorbed, how it spreads in the body, how it's metabolized, and how it's excreted. That's all pharmacokinetics is. It's just really the journey of the drug in the body.
Right.
So under normal circumstances, we have around 80 micromolar concentration of vitamin C in our blood. When I say micromolar, and again, the way I describe this to my patients is basically this. If you have 1 liter of lemonade and you want to sweeten it, 1 liter, and you put 80 granules of sugar in that 1 liter of fluid, that's 80 micromolar. If I added 10 granules of sugar, it'd be 10 micromolar.
Right.
So 10 in 1,000. 1,000 mils, 1 liter. Okay? So our resting serum concentration of vitamin C is 80 to 100 micromolar. No matter how much vitamin C you consume, because it's so tightly controlled, the pharmacokinetics are so tightly controlled by the GI system, that's why you shit yourself, you never will exceed 220 micromolar. In a great study, I think it was Padiati et al., I think it was 2004, they administered 3 grams every 4 hours, never exceeds 220 micromolar. Here's the kicker, however. Vitamin C is not therapeutic until it crests 300 micromolar. In other words, vitamin C exerts no therapeutic effect until it crests 300 micromolar. In other words, it wouldn't have mattered how much vitamin C they administered orally. It was never going to be therapeutic. And in cancer, we're actually looking for a minimum of 10,000 to 20,000 micromolar.
Wow.
Levels that are only achievable through IV high-dose vitamin C.
And it's obviously bypassing the digestive route when you go intravenously, right? So
vitamin C does not, and this is where a lot of doctors kind of like go tilt. Because vitamin C, like a lot of nutrients, don't follow first-order kinetics. And again, to explain first-order kinetics in a really simple way, we are taught small molecular weight drugs, essentially. If you double the dose of the drug, it doubles the dose in your bloodstream. That's first-order kinetics. Most small molecular weight drugs like vitamin C, like zinc, etc., should fall under that first-order kinetics. Vitamin C doesn't. Most vitamins and nutrients don't. Our body has this interplay where they regulate it way differently. Doesn't follow first-order kinetics. So again, oral vitamin C, for the most part, especially in terms of cancer, is useless.
Right. I remember when I worked at the fire department, I started getting a little like sniffles. And I was like, you know what? Heck, I'm going to take as much vitamin C as I can throughout this like 24-hour period. And the next day I had the worst canker sores in my mouth. I would only assume that something had an effect that wasn't positive from it, right? But when it comes to vitamin C, so we talk about the oral version, administration of vitamin C and intravenous.
Yeah.
Now, there's other types of routes of administration as well.
Not really for vitamin C.
Okay.
Like you're never really going to use vitamin C IM. Again, you're never really going to, you will never exert a therapeutic effect.
What about do they make it like liposomal vitamin C?
Be better. Still not the same.
No. That's typically being absorbed through the mucous membranes?
Yeah, and the fat as a carrier, generally fat's always going to be a better carrier. So a lot of like large molecules like curcuminoids that are found in turmeric, carotenes, they're always going to be absorbed better in fat.
Okay.
So any type of liposomal milieu is going to increase absorption because fat is just more easily absorbed. It's not as tightly regulated by the enterocytes in the GI tract.
Right.
But again, not the same as IV.
Yeah.
An IV medicine is a completely different animal. And if oncologists were to really look at the research and begin to realize how at high doses it becomes oxidative. So if it's oxidative, just like chemo is, the two should work synergistically.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, it does.
Yeah.
And by the way, it does.
Do humans naturally produce vitamin C?
No, we have to. That's why we can get scurvy.
Are we the only mammals that don't produce vitamin C? Or are there other mammals?
I think the only vitamin that we actually produce is vitamin D.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, vitamin D is, again, requires sunlight. And again, even vitamin D, as a supplement is not the same as vitamin D secondary to exposure from sunlight. Not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's incredible when you begin to look at it and when you begin to look at sort of the applications in oncology or even in infectious diseases like sepsis, how vitamin C works synergistically with how it affects tumor cells, as an example, is really incredible.
Yeah, like what kind of results are you seeing with your patients when you do the high dose vitamin C, specifically like your cancer patients?
They're always going to outperform the standard of care alone.
Really?
And I don't really think at all someone who's practicing integrative oncology should not be doing the standard of care, or ever convincing a patient not to do the standard of care. Has nothing to do with that. It's that the studies that are done together, chemo becomes less toxic.
Right.
And it becomes more effective. So you can imagine, vitamin C is almost not toxic enough to kill shit. But it's so, that oxidative effect depletes the tumor cells. It depletes the tumor cells' glutathione stores. And it so weakens the tumor cell, yet not affecting our healthy cells at all, that once chemotherapy is administered, it becomes far more lethal at far lower dosing. And vitamin C is also supportive to our immune system, right? And it's ultimately your vitamin C, or it's ultimately your immune system which does the final kill. That's true whether it's a bug or cancer. It's your immune system. And chemotherapy, because it attacks rapidly dividing cells, that includes your immune system. So it's what's called myelosuppressive. It suppresses the bone marrow, so your vitamin C level, your immune cells go down, specifically your lymphocytes, your natural killer cells, your T cells, and that's why HIV patients were dying of AIDS, because they didn't have T cells. And what we see with chemotherapy is the patient's lymphocytes go down. One of the markers we always look at is the neutrophils to the lymphocyte ratio. And as that ratio goes up, in other words, lymphocytes go down, the risk of death goes up.
Right.
And again, vitamin C can protect against that.
So throughout that process, you're really monitoring a lot of
Everything,
different
all of those labs.
biomarkers, right?
And the one thing we always tell our cancer patients is very simple, is that we don't fall in love with the therapies. We fall in love with the results.
Right.
Our responsibility is to each other. In other words, to look at the scorecard, and are we making progress? Because if we're not making progress, good medicine is achieving a better result at a lower price, in simple terms. So if you can achieve something more simply, that's a better strategy, right? So you don't really want to be just doing exhaustive therapies. And again, that's one of the issues with that's out there, is people just do shit without actually measuring the results. Because if you're not making progress and improvement on your patient, just stop doing it.
Right. Have you obviously you've done a lot of supportive care for cancer patients with high dose of vitamin C.
Lots.
Have you had any patients that come to you and says, I don't want chemo, I don't want radiation, I just want to do natural treatments, I want to do vitamin C?
I have. Try to talk them out of it.
Have you actually seen the cancer ever reverse itself just going that route?
What you see is that you prolonged, it depends, because oftentimes we'll see very aggressive cancers.
Okay.
And I have this example of, it was a triple positive breast cancer. And the patient really didn't want to do either a lumpectomy or mastectomy. And of course, I have to respect my patient's wishes. We're there to support them, but you also want them to make good, informed decisions.
Right.
So every few visits, I'd say, look, much easier if we just have a skilled surgeon just cut this out. Make everybody's job easier.
Right.
You have less heavy lifting to do. But she was listening to people that were giving her false hope because they don't actually treat cancer patients. They theoretically treat cancer patients online, which again is total bullshit, right? So they'll say, oh no, you can cure just with this X or Y. Can you? Have you? Because I haven't seen it. And eventually the tumor cell, was coming out of her body.
Wow.
And eventually she died. Did we keep her alive for way longer than she should have been? Yes. But it would have been a much better success. I would cut it out, and then we could do our work.
Yeah. So this is where like conventional medicine and functional medicine really take a good play together.
Yeah, like this idea of lines in the sand is just such bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, like that's one of my pet peeves. You know, like there's still doctors out there that, you know, we've sent blood work to, and they'll say, I'm not going to read the blood work. I need to, and I'm like, it's blood work. Like, are you really so biased and so small-minded?
Yeah.
And it reminds me that I always think like, it's sort of like the analogy, it's like, you won't drink out of the fountain because I'm the colored kid that drank from it.
Hmm.
And I think change is coming, and there is nothing more powerful than idea whose time has come, you know, like the Victor Hugo quote,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that when I think of change, my wife, you met Michelle, we got married in Dallas, Texas. She was teaching in a private school. She taught English. Her Mrs. Willoughby beside her taught American history. Mrs. Willoughby taught at a segregated school.
Mm.
Not went to a segregated, taught at a segregated school. And you think about it, and she taught with my wife, and you think, holy smokes, how much has changed in a short period of time. Medicine is going to have that same massive change.
Yeah, I believe it.
Because you cannot
Yeah.
continue this whole process of us and them. Like we're, you know, type of functional medicine is different from conventional medicine. No, conventional medicine is not complete. It needs functional medicine.
Well, let's talk about that because right now we have a big movement happening here in the U.S., the MAHA movement, Make
Yeah.
America Healthy Again, which in my opinion, it's part of that change
Me too.
that we
Yeah, I
want to
believe
see in
that.
the course
I
of
believe that.
medicine. So do you think, well, let me ask you, what do you think about the MAHA movement?
I think that it will transform medicine and healthcare
Wow.
because everything's on the table.
Yeah.
You know, for either proponents or detractors, it's always the evidence and the outcome that's going to make the difference. And what you're going to find is that whether it's heart disease or diabetes or cancer, it's not going to be any one treatment. It's going to be a combination of treatments.
Right.
You know, when COVID hit my town, I sent a memo and a letter and an email to my hospital, Royal Victoria Hospital in Barrie, Ontario. And I said, I can triage. We have oxygen. I said, we will do high-dose vitamin C because right now, I said, we'll triage the patients, we'll assess the patients, and we'll treat them for free.
Wow.
For free. Crickets. And instead, patients were getting COVID, being told vitamin D is bullshit, zinc is bullshit, you can't do anything, and then you had to wait, and they were dying until a vaccine was released months into the process.
Right.
And did our immune system suddenly transform that it was no longer like zinc didn't work anymore, or glutathione didn't work anymore, or vitamin C at high doses didn't work anymore for this particular infectious disease? Of course it did.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not the bug, it's the terrain. And it's not just the bug, it's the terrain, which affects everything. So this whole functional medicine movement, Sam, and I know I'm preaching the converted, man, is going to make a big difference. And the MAHA movement is really allowing for transparency.
Yeah.
And within the context of the transparency, look, there's going to be some bullshit. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also means that we're not going to be force-fed a model that is broken and kowtow to a hegemony and a system that is no longer serving everyone and is leading to the perpetuation and propagation of an epidemic where all of our healthcare systems are crumbling.
Right. It's part of that corrupt system. I'd hate to say it, but it's a corrupt system. the people with the deep pockets, big pharma. And yeah, there's a lot of great things that big pharma has done, a lot of lives that they have saved. But at the same time, there's a whole different sector in medicine, a different approach that has to be taken. And I'm with you on it. I do think that this Maha movement is going to give us some of that change in the course of medicine that we've been looking for. Specifically, RFK Jr. is pushing for a lot of these things. He believes in a lot of the stuff that we're doing, but you start seeing the people that have been nominated, the doctors, right, to lead the FDA, to lead the CDC, to lead as the Surgeon General. These are people that have been talking what we've been talking for years.
That's right.
So, um,
That's
but
right.
yeah.
And and a lot of a lot of my patients in particular are frightened of this movement.
Yeah, it's kind of
Which is weird.
interesting. Yeah, and not only that though, but also like it should be a nonpartisan movement,
Of course
right?
it should be.
And all of a sudden, it's just like just because it's under the Trump administration, it's just like people just they
It's
think the worst.
politicized.
Yeah, yeah,
It's politicized. And the way I look at it is the more freedom you have to make decisions, the more tools you have in your toolbox. It doesn't change vaccine research.
right.
It doesn't, but it brings to the table more than just vaccine research. Was glutathione effectively studied? Because that disease killed because it became inflammatory. And every chronic disease that's metabolically driven, including infectious diseases, it drives up inflammation. Insulin and inflammation are the two killers. And yet, in most primary care settings, insulin's never checked. Inflammatory markers are never checked.
That's scary.
It is scary.
Yeah, that's almost like, in my opinion, almost a form of malpractice if you don't do that as a physician.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. So with vitamin C, is there any other type of nutrients that goes very well in conjunction with vitamin C?
Almost all antimicrobials seem to work effectively with high dose vitamin C, and I think that's why it works well in sepsis and infectious diseases. But when you look at things like IVs, like artesunate, which was used traditionally for wormwood, in a lot of like hormone positive cancers, you could see artesunate when it's administered before that seems to make that even more effective. We'll use alpha lipoic acid sometimes. Mistletoe used effectively because mistletoe affects the immune system, and mistletoe is the most commonly prescribed cancer drug in German-speaking countries. I had the luxury of being at and observing at 3 cancer clinics, German-speaking cancer clinics, one in Switzerland, 2 in Germany, as part of a contingent of naturopathic physicians that were invited to go.
Nice.
And it was incredible because they were using the mistletoe or the high dose vitamin C completely in concert with the standard of care. It wasn't like one or the other.
Right.
And a lot of times when we were in the rotations, when we were doing the grand rounds after, I kept thinking, man, we would have given up on that patient to just go home and die. And they're
Wow.
like, no, just change the chemo, increase the mistletoe. Cancer came back, increased the mistletoe, changed the chemo, and that patient was alive under like, we just would have given up on them because we don't have enough tools in our toolbox because we're only thinking one way.
Right.
And remember, when you use chemo, because it doesn't affect the stem cells just come back. And guess what? They're now not susceptible to the same chemotherapy.
Right.
That's why you need your immune system.
So really, from what I hear from you, it's really enhancing your own natural ability to fight off a lot of these illnesses
And weakening
diseases.
all of that, weakening the tumor. You can use these therapies to weaken the tumor. You can affect the inflammatory cascade. You can affect the metabolic cascade, the way it receives information, the way it receives nutrients. Like you're putting metabolic stressors, and when you begin to couple all of these, you can have a very profound effect.
Right.
Like the future is going to be that they're going to unlock the way the mitochondria and the metabolism works, the inflammatory cascade, and then the immune system, and then your body's going to clear it.
Right.
And it's going to reset the mitochondria, and your cell is going to stop being undifferentiated. It's going to go back to being a liver cell or a colon cell.
Right. Right. What other illnesses are you treating with high dose vitamin C?
Skin conditions, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
We had a severe case of colitis. We see that a lot. and again, at a certain dose, it seems to affect the inflammatory cascade, and partly because the enterocytes, which are the cells which line the GI tract, actually have vitamin C transporters. Partly it's tightly regulated, but when you give it intravenously, it can affect those inflammatory bowel conditions.
Okay.
Because our main exposure to the outside world is through our gut. And people's guts and their gut health is total, I guess, shit, if that's the pun.
Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, it really is, and gut health is so important. So you always hear about, especially now that people are testing more for like type of gut issues. You start hearing more of like leaky gut. How does vitamin C take a play with people who have leaky gut?
I think in leaky gut, you're basically getting an increase in that sort of in the gap spaces. So it allows those nutrients and allows bugs and allows other components to sort of migrate into the peripheral serum, which is going to begin to affect the inflammatory cascade. Effectively, everything that we eat is screened by our GI. Like when we think of our immune system, right? Our immune system is, just in simple terms, protects us from the outside world.
Right.
Where are we most exposed to the outside world? You would think here, like our skin, but we have barrier. Our eyes have actual secretions. Our oropharynx has secretions as well. It's really from what we eat. We're literally taking a foreign something from this outside world and putting it into our body. So clearly our immune system has to be most highly concentrated in our gut. And that's why it's constantly being screened. And it's either upregulating or downregulating.
Yeah.
And the moment you get an upregulation, an immune reaction in the gut, like when you eat foods that your body doesn't like, or that has an increased immunoglobulin IgG reaction, then you get that whole immune cascade, which then causes increase in the gap junctions, which can cause the movement of those pathogens into the systemic circulation.
With the vitamin C, is there are there different forms of IVC that are out there?
I mean, I would say this. We chatted a little bit about this in the past. Use a reputable lab that's compounding properly.
Okay.
And then you won't have to worry about the forms, the types. There really is only one proper way to compound IV, like vitamin C, ascorbic acid for compounding. It's going to be sodium ascorbate. It will be high in sodium. And again, that's why I cringe when I'm auditing files and I see clinics using sodium chloride, like saline bags, for high dose vitamin C.
Right.
That's insanity, because again, the osmolarity is so high in vitamin C in comparison to other nutrients that you're again affecting, and you can burn out people's veins too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where they really should be utilizing the sterile water and creating
Yeah,
an
because you're
osmolarity.
affecting
Right.
them osmolarity in a positive way. I had a client that reached out to one of our DripBar clinics in the U.S. and she had said, "Well, I can get vitamin C, cheaper, IV vitamin C cheaper at this clinic." I'm like, "Go for it. Like, fill your boots. I mean, we're not here to sort of control the market." I said, "But do they use sterile water? Do they balance it with magnesium, potassium, and calcium? Do they have experience administering it? Where's the vitamin C coming from?"
Yeah.
Like,
Well-
don't screw around with your health.
Yeah.
And people will continually buy cheap supplements, go to discount IV providers, go to IV providers that aren't properly licensed. And if you're putting something into your body in hopes of it affecting your health, and you don't know the quality or the training, like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. Especially when you start thinking this is going directly into your veins, right? Directly into the cellular system. So you're already bypassing certain like defense mechanisms, defense routes, by
Yeah,
so
completely.
whatever they're putting into that vein, you better really make sure and hope that it's the right stuff.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, completely, man. And it's They're not, and it's part of the reason why the work that we're doing with the American IV Association is so important
Yeah.
because we are raising the bar, we are shifting policy, right? We are making
Yeah.
a difference, and at least, I mean, I like to think we're making a difference anyway, but I think we are, and I think that the more we do it, the more research we publish, the more clinical work we do. Like, look, I have people that attack me too, but every time I'm like, well, then let's debate it.
Right.
Because I know what I'm doing is right. And I know it's right because it's always changing.
Yeah.
It's not anti-historical. I keep modifying the protocols. We keep making things better.
Yeah. You got to stick with the times, right? You got to be up to
Yeah.
date with some of these things. Now with the vitamin C, people have talked about the different forms that are being made in these reputable compounding pharmacies. You have some that are corn-based, right? And then others that are made from like the tapioca vitamin C, that's from the cassava root. Is there really a significant difference? And the reason why I ask is I've heard a lot of people, want to go more the natural route from something that's like the tapioca base.
Yeah, I think that if you're using high dose vitamin C for cancer specifically, or specifically for autoimmune conditions, you generally want the old school naturopathic food allergens, like before there was IgG testing or IgA testing, like the old school, like we're talking the 60s, 70s,
Right.
was eliminate wheat, dairy, eggs, soy, corn, and orange. Those were sort of like the known food allergens that are just generally consistent with affecting people. You want to essentially have, especially in an autoimmune condition, preservative free as much as you can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and to me that's very important, especially when you're going high dose vitamin C, where you're administering sometimes multiple vials of vitamin C. Where if you have the preservative in there, the benzyl alcohol, it kind of defeats the purpose of when we say, hey, we want to reduce oxidative stress, we want to reduce inflammation. If you're introducing
Things that can
and
affect
knowing
it, yeah.
toxins,
You
right?
need to work with reputable labs, and
Right.
I will say this too. Being part of both the American and Canadian side of things, IV nutrients, especially vitamin C, is way overpriced in the U.S.
I believe it.
And
Do you think
if you're listening out there, stop price gouging the patients because yeah, it's cheaper in Canada.
Do
And
you think it's because of all the regulation that's put on a lot
No,
of these
I don't.
compounding pharmacies? No.
I think it's just commerce, and we harvest our olives every year in Greece. I'll invite you and Ben.
Nice.
I
like olives.
And for our olive oil. Anyway, my brother was indulging. He's a kidney transplant recipient. Can't really indulge very much.
Right.
Had gout flared up. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to run to the pharmacy and get you some allopurinol just to lower the gout. And I went and bought a packet and I gave her 10 euros. I think I had in my pocket, or 20 euros. I was literally coming from the Olive Grove. And I went to the pharmacy and I said, man, just go home, rest your because his ankle was swollen. I went into the pharmacy, gave her 10 euros or 20 euros, and she goes, I can't really break it. I said, well, how much is the the carton of allopurinol? She said it was like €1.26.
Wow.
That's not what allopurinol costs here.
No, not at all.
Right? So I think that we need to rethink a lot of things. And that's, again, the whole MAHA movement is asking us to rethink things. Yeah. And I think that's, how can that be bad? How could being more inclusive in terms of, and providing patients with more options for questioning the status quo, when the status quo is failing?
Right.
It's failing.
Yeah, I agree. And this is why it really has to be a nonpartisan thing, and we all have to really support this whole movement. Now, Doc, we talked a lot about cancer patients, other patients with other type of chronic illnesses receiving vitamin C intravenously. What about the regular, person like you and I who are pretty healthy, I would say, can they benefit from vitamin C intravenously?
They can. I don't think you would want to do high dose though.
Right,
I don't think you'd want to do an oxidative therapy unless you were doing like a parasite cleanse,
right.
like once a year or twice a year.
Or if
where
you have like a cough or something that comes on.
yeah, you'd want to do probably around 20 cc's, around 10 grams
Okay.
is the dose that you would want. And for cough, you'd also want to do glutathione, which again is an antioxidant.
The master antioxidant.
The master
right?
antioxidant. That's right. And you'd want to use glutathione for cough. You'd probably want to do that glutathione with N-acetylcysteine, both IV and nebulized
Okay.
to get into the lung tissue. You'd want to use zinc in higher dose. You'd want to use vitamin D in higher dose. So you're almost kind of like maximizing the antioxidant capabilities of the tissues in an early onset cold or a non-responsive cold or flu.
Right.
And only if the virus, like Epstein-Barr, is where you need to go, like those viruses or COVID, Epstein-Barr, where it takes over is where you would want to do 25 grams of vitamin C.
Right. Okay. So, Doc, you have this book here. We got to talk about it. When oranges become apple.
Yeah, what your oncologist won't tell you about IV vitamin C and cancer. So if I wrote this book on the heels of us doing research on vitamin C and high dose vitamin C and chemotherapy. So I wrote it in a period of 90 days. But the writing was in the editing. I re-edited it and re-edited it and re-edited it over and over and over again because I wanted it to be user-friendly.
Okay.
So that patients have those exact same questions that everybody has. How does this work? How do I communicate with my oncologist? Like, how does it work with chemo? How does it work with radiation? Why does it work? What else can I do? And these questions needed to be answered in a very simple way. And I'm super proud of this work. I really, really am. And it's a book that I've given is doing great on Amazon. I've given tons of copies away, and every patient that reads it gets it. So I'll say, like, before you come back for your report of findings, I'm going to run the blood work. We're going to go through the imaging. I'm going to go through all your CT scans, all your MRIs. I want you to read the book. And I said, I promise you, it's easy to read. It's super easy to read, and it will answer all of your questions. And if you're out there and you want to know how and why IV vitamin C works for cancer, this is the book to read, I think.
I love it. And we'll include the links and stuff here on the podcast to make sure people get access to it. So, Doc, as we start wrapping up here, we have a lot of medical providers that tune into the podcast and a lot of consumers as well. If someone resonates with today's message on high dose vitamin C, what is one thing you can leave them off with?
Use it. Use it. You will be surprised. Test properly. Run a panel. Always run a panel before doing high dose vitamin C. Always include do G6PD. Never cut corners, but use it. And you will be blown away at its simplicity. And part of when I wrote this book, even in the introduction, I said it's not to oversell vitamin C or to undersell it,
Right.
but to give you the research and the understanding of how and why it works. And I think we're only beginning to peel back the layers of the onion of why and how it works.
Right.
But just use it.
Just use it. Love it. So if people want to find more and learn more about you, Doc, where do they find you?
They can reach out to wellnessdoctor.ca. And oftentimes that's, I think, both our website and our Instagram handle and stuff like that. And I'm happy to always, I really like when people reach out.
Yeah.
This process is, especially at this stage in my career, it's my 26th year in practice.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
You don't even look old enough to be in practice for that many years.
It's, and I'm just learning. And I can't tell you how much I learn from everybody, not just physicians at conferences, not just through books, through my patients, through my colleagues.
Right.
I learned from you. Like your glutamine post, and I target glutamine. And there was a nutrient that I wasn't familiar with. And I'm like, damn, that's awesome. And I instantly did a research review on that nutrient that I didn't know. And I go, there it is. Like, you have to be open. Part of this is to learn. And when we stop learning, that's when you should get out of the game.
That's the truth, man.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that when we all work collaboratively and, you know, especially medicine, it has to be heart led.
I agree.
And one of the reasons I love you is because you're heart led. You know, and if you're leading with your heart, it's not, oh, we'll get to the right place.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So yeah, reach out to me, man. So if you're out there and you want to, you want to communicate, you want to reach out, I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome, man. And we'll include all the links and stuff too. Doc, it was this is very, very valuable information that you've shared today. And it's an episode that I've been waiting to actually put together. So appreciate you for coming here on a Healthy Point of View podcast. And we'll bring more to the people, man, through what we're doing.
I appreciate you too, man.
Thank
you.
Absolutely. Guys, you heard Dr. Rallis. Vitamin C, it's a powerful tool. Not just an antioxidant, but it can be an oxidizer, which has its own different powerful effects, especially for people that are very sick, that are fighting some of these diseases that we continue to hear and sometimes don't see the actual solution that we want to see. He's pretty much has really got it to a certain place where he's cracking the code. He put the book together to empower you to be able to take control of your health, especially when you're dealing with these type of illnesses. So make sure you check it out. Make sure you share this with your friends, family. Follow all the pages, and we'll see you for the next one.